This is going to be a far more measured response video than you're probably used to from me, partly because I actually respect JTC and I actually respect the mindset of Smite Psykers. I just believe they're very misinformed. Okay, so first, let me just really quickly give you a very fast intro. I am going to respond to his primary points in a TLDR fashion, then we're going to watch the whole video to show you I'm not being disingenuous while elaborating more and directly countering his exact words. I do not know any of these other people that I'm going to show in these clips. These clips are merely here to accentuate my point. I agree that Smite is problematic, but for the complete opposite reasons that he mentions. Also, he says Smite will always be meta in Auric Damnation missions. This is no longer an opinion, that's a statement, and this statement is objectively wrong, as I'm about to show you. The actual meta with Smite Psyker is either Gun Psyker, but that's a little more rare. The real most common and highest effective build that you're going to see 90% of the time is going to be Trauma Staff with Brain Burst, and the crit provides Wildfire, or not Wildfire, Fire. Sorry, I forgot the name. Now, let me just show you. Also, every single Psyker Blitz is good. They are all tools that should be used at different times. None of them are overpowered. None of them are underpowered. His first point that he makes that I'd like to counter is that Brain Burst has been left in the dust and needs a buff. This is true solo Auric Maelstrom. Brain Burst. Telepots. One of the best players there is, in my opinion. He uses Brain Burst in his sail in most of his videos. If you don't believe me, you can go watch, please watch all of his videos. You'll be a lot better player than if you watch other people's crap. Chokib, the literal poster boy of good Tide gameplay. He only uses Smite one time in a video showcasing it. This is Dre. He is one of the better players that I know that swears by Smite, but that's because Smite is good for no damage runs, which he uploads quite a good bit of. If you watch his clutch clips, you see that he doesn't have Smite on all the time, because it's not the meta, it's not that powerful. And this is Agent Chaos. He is another very good player who also quite likes Smite, but you'll see even he, half of his videos are Smite, half are the other things. There is an undeniable trend of the higher you go up in the skill level of players, the less Smite gets used. Okay, now, right here, Trauma Staff is just better than Smite. It can crowd control more enemies while also dishing out damage. This is an example. He did that one Trauma Staff explosion, and look, it completely stopped the horde apart from the first, 5 guys, but look at the damage that it dishes out. So if somebody were smiting here, the enemy's mass would stop them from running through that choke point, which is good, but what happens when we're assuming Auric here, so I only play Auric Maelstrom, what happens when a wave of special spawns and one of them turns into a chaos spawn? What happens then? The smite gets broken by the chaos spawn jumping on them, and all those guys run through, and now there's specials all over the place behind you, and there's a horde rushing you down in front. Oh, that's how you wipe. The actual way you handle this spot with anything, just pro tip for you, run the fuck back, and just there's a perfect loop on this spot. Anyway, if there was no smite like this, then look, you can still crowd control with the Trauma Staff by knocking over more enemies than the smite target cap allows you for, but look at the damage he can output while doing that. You'll notice a difference here is he is just using the S key instead of mindlessly holding W. That's the real red pill of Tide games. Just walk backwards. You'll play much better. But you see, look, he's able to absolutely destroy bulwarks, flak armor, carapace armor. He's able to completely melt the horde. None of this stuff can keep up with him. He's not doing anything crazy here either. He's just doing Trauma Staff, dodge, slide backwards. There you go. And it's enough crowd control that you can combine it with mobility. Now, again, I already showed you telepots. He pretty much only uses it, but look, he uses this exact same build because this build is like the definitive, try-hard, really good Psyker build. Now, I also want to talk about this clip in particular right here. So, there's music in this clip. That's why it's muted, by the way. So, this part of the map I'm sure you're all familiar with. They could be using Trauma Staff in this choke point while also letting the barrel damage them, while also walking backwards a bit to the second choke point directly behind them. Then there's another choke point directly behind that that's a long hallway, which leads back into another room. They have unlimited room to work with here, and they have several choke points to work with here. But instead, this is what we get. The Trauma Staff Psyker is just hitting the singular bulwark for some reason, and the Smite Psyker is walking closer towards this barrel, which this is just a recipe for disaster, and that's exactly what happens here. And look, the hit mass is what's stopping people from moving here, not the smite. But this is just kind of my point. Imagine if he was using something like the Trauma Staff right now. He would be knocking them over while dealing even more damage. Okay, now, let's get into the actual video, finally. So those are the 2 points I want to counter. Psyker has other tools that do what Smite's trying to do, just better. Void Strike Staff can do a light charge on the the M2, and then hit M1. That can stun things. Trauma Staff can stun things. Psyker just has so many crowd control options that are better than Smite because they actually deal substantial damage.
If you were to ask the darktide community how many enemies Smite chains to, the answer you would receive from some would be too many.
Well, I would not ask that question because that's kind of a redundant question, no? When you consider that Psyker has options that are not capped. I would instead ask, would you still use Smite if it dealt no damage? If the answer to that question is yes, then I would say, why not use the Trauma Staff, which can knock over as many enemies as Smite chains to, while also dealing damage? Then I would also ask the question, would you still use Smite if it did not stun, but dealt more damage? I would also counter that by saying, why not just use something like the Void Strike Staff, which does more damage by virtue of hitting more things? That's when you start to think Smite kind of is in this awkward middle place where it really isn't better than anything, and it just kind of exists.
Psyker's Smite has been a hot discussion topic for a while now.
Not really. It's already settled. Lower skill players love Smite because it lowers the skill ceiling of the game drastically and makes it very easy for them to comprehend and understand. Whereas higher end players absolutely hate it because it not only makes the game boring, the person using it is basically crutching because they don't know how else to contribute to the game because they don't want to learn the mechanics.
But between the various opinions and discussions circulating around the community, it's difficult to pinpoint just how problematic the ability actually is.
I think it's incredibly problematic. I think it's problematic because it builds horrible habits. You cannot play Smite for 1,000 hours and be good at the game. Your gameplay, when you aren't using Smite, would look exactly like someone with 100 hours.
Is Smite truly problematic in its current iteration, or is it all just a misunderstanding? Let's talk about it. The idea behind the ability of Smite is, for all intents and purposes, actually very interesting.
No, it's not. So again, this is a very politician wishy-washy video where he likes to give very non-conclusive statements like, oh, guys, you know, like very, very, it's very, I don't want to offend anyone. That's fair. And I'm definitely gonna criticize that because that's how you lead to bad slop content where you try to play all sides and get as many views as possible. But I'm going to just lay this one out for, like, everyone. Smite is bad game design. You hold down one button, then you hold down another button, and a set number of things in front of you get immobilized. You can't move, you can't aim it, you can't do anything skill-wise, you can't do anything that involves thinking. It is about as basic and bad as an ability can be in a video game. So, well-designed? Fuck no. I don't think anyone would argue Smite is a well-designed tool.
The ability to lock down and stun lock enemies to either make them easy targets or buy your team time to maneuver is a support player's wet dream. And while not everyone might
no, you know it's a support player's wet dream? Clicking a button and giving everyone 100 more health. You know, Book Zealot, while also stunning everything. Or, you know, Ogren hitting Taunt and giving everyone like 40% more damage because of Shield Bash and making everything attack them. That's a support player's wet dream. Holding things still and hoping that people come to your rescue is I don't know any support player who'd like that. Maybe like someone's girlfriend who like only plays on sedation is into that kind of thing, but
find watching your team kill everything for you fun, you cannot deny the fact
that would be fun if you could actually support your team. If Smite gave them a decent damage increase or mobility or survivability, like actual like something numerical, not just like by virtue of stunning things. It would be fun to watch. It'd be like you're watching your little minions while you Palpatine in the background. But it's just not. It's just not. You just hold down one button, hold down another button, then watch people in front of you play the game. That's all it is. It's mechanically awful.
That Smite is an incredibly powerful tool at Psyker's disposal.
No, it's not. Trauma Staff does the same thing, just better.
But the question is, how powerful is it? Smite.
It's powerful in this situation. This veteran would have gotten fucking destroyed. Actually, no. Wait, I'm sorry. They have gold toughness. So he would not have lost any health from this. Never mind. Even in a situation where I was about to praise Smite, something else is doing its job at better.
It excels in two main situations. When there are too many enemies on screen at once to safely deal with.
Okay, so holding them still in that case doesn't actually deal with the problem. It just hopes other people are able to deal with the problem. So on the off chance that they aren't able to deal with the problem that you could have dealt with by not smiting, you know, the opportunity cost has now left you screwed.
and when the horde is physically too dense to deal with before they pose a serious threat.
This is never a thing. First off, this is not a thing. This game has to be playable on consoles. You will never see Cat of 3 Deathwish Onslaught levels of density in this game because of the old shitty Xbox that this game is contractually obligated to run on. So you're never going to see that. Second off, the more dense hordes are, the better Psyker staffs become. The more things Void Strike gets to hit, and the more things Trauma can blow up with its center huge damage. So again, I don't understand this point at all. If let's say there's 100 Maulers stacked up, why wouldn't you just want to Trauma staff them to knock them all over instead of Smite's target cap of like 8 or 7? And deal like a quarter or more, a quarter or a third of their health all at once. It's so much better.
The former refers to massive amounts of a certain enemy type or...
Also, hold on, before we get into this, I want to give you a real demonstration of what I'm talking about. Let's say he has Trauma Staff here and he doesn't smite. What changes in this clip? Okay, so that horde right there, he does one Trauma Staff explosion, everything in that horde but like 3 guys dies. But instead, look, now his whole team has to go back and deal with it. So this is 75% of the team's ability to do anything dedicated to dealing this horde that he could have just deleted in 1 second with a staff.
Or buy your team time to maneuver is a support player's wet dream.
And then look, he almost gets flanked here by these guys, which again, he could have just done a real click R2, R1 with the Trauma Staff, 0 charge, behind the bulwark and knock it over.
Everyone might find watching your team kill everything for green at once to safely deal with.
And then right here, there's more stuff. Look at how long it takes them to push past this. If he was dealing damage, they would have been past this section already with all this stuff dead. Imagine he has the Void Strike staff here. I don't know, the video's just low quality recording. It's on HD. My recording is software. I don't know, it's just, I guess his settings aren't configured properly. But let's say he does a Void Strike staff through this. He kills all these guys. He does not have to, and anything that doesn't die, the explosion on the ground would knock them over. Let's say he Trauma Staffs this corner. These 3 guys die, these 2 guys get knocked over. And here's another thing.
Or mixtures of enemies.
Look, 2 coherency. So where's the rest of his team at during this? He's not supporting anything right now. At best, he's saving his own skin.
Maulers, Crushers.
Okay, so he gets him with the grenade. Do you know how else you could achieve the same thing? Even if you don't have the staff. Just by being that close, they were in melee. They weren't going to shoot him. If they're in melee, they're not running. Shotgunners don't move a lot in general. This grenade still kills all these guys in this situation, regardless of Smite. Smite achieved nothing here.
Ragers.
But it led to this guy getting grabbed by a mutant. The same guy that was next to him that killed these things. That if he wasn't so dedicated to smiting these guys, the guys which would already be dead if he brought killing power instead of Smite, could have prevented this mutant from grabbing him. So now Smite is being an active detriment.
Disablers, gunners, and the like.
And look at these gunners. Instead of dropping this support shield, why not just use Venting Shriek to have them all die?
These enemies are threat.
That would have killed all of those enemies, and he would not be cowering behind a barrier right now.
But in massive quantities
also, if you do this, please stop smiting, unless Smite's going to hit its target cap. It's arguably not even worth it then. And if you're going to smite like 2 or 3 gunners, just kill them. It's 2 trash gunners.
Serious threat that they can effectively end a run in the blink of an eye. Smite helps keep these...
Oh, also, by the way, can I point this out? He's trying to make the case that Smite is meta and very powerful. Meanwhile, he's using warp charges instead of empowered psionics. If it was that good, wouldn't you take the node that is the least amount of investment because it's the least talent points and makes this the best it could be? It's almost like it's not meta.
Crushers, Ragers, and opens up windows of opportunity for your team to push up and eliminate these threats.
Okay, but again, right here. So what happens when your team isn't with you? Nothing. You just flounder. Second off, did you just remember the video that I showcased with the true solo? Pushing up is the problem. Running into crowds of enemies is how you get gunned down by gunners you didn't know were there, and that's why you die to gunners, and that's why you think gunner resist is so good.
Both quickly and safely. The latter refers to when hordes themselves are physically too large to deal with.
Which again is never a thing, and if it was a thing, why would you not use something that can deal with the hordes? There are unlimited cleave things in this game. Brutal Momentum Power Sword. There is Trauma Staff. Those things can hit as many targets as the model collides with. It does not matter if there is 1,000 enemies stacked up. Power Sword with Brutal Momentum and something like Wrath or whatever is going to cleave through most of it. So what do you mean, hordes that are too large that they can't be dealt with? That's never a thing.
Adding in multiple elites and specials to an already large horde can make that horde infinitely more dangerous to deal with.
Well, can I say something a tad bit elitist? If people are just running up into hordes of mixed elites and specials and getting themselves killed, maybe the answer isn't Smite, maybe the answer is a vote kick. Maybe say, hey man, it's clear you're not experienced yet for this difficulty, come back a little later. You might say that sounds toxic and elitist. I would say it's toxic and douchey to waste 3 people's time doing something you're not ready to do.
Which Smite can help to safely control. Some maps or map modifiers causes infinite hordes to spawn at key places, which...
So this is more factually incorrect information. The way spawns actually work is based on the nav mesh and the ticket system that the director has. The director builds tickets the longer you spend in the map, and he spends those tickets spawning enemies. You know, the ambient enemies, so on and so forth. Infinite hordes can never be triggered by map modifiers. That is impossible. What is triggered by infinite hordes is things like middle map events or ending events. Consider this. Think about the intensity of spawns during the final event of like Hab Draco versus a Auric Shock Troop high intensity gauntlet. There are many times in Auric Shock Troops where you are able to walk between sections of the map and you don't have hordes harassing you. You don't have constant things spawning you. There's a lot of ambient stuff. What he's confusing here is he's confusing ambient pre-spawned in enemies and the time it takes him and his like average pub groups to kill them with the director building enough tickets to spawn hordes, and he's considering it as infinite. No, if you're playing all meta like me and my friends do, you're clearing those entire rooms in like 10 seconds tops, and you're running between them without any horde harassment because the way it works is the director gets more tickets on the more time passes. So let's say you spend 20 seconds in the map. Let's say he gets 20 tickets. This is also dependent on difficulty and modifiers. Like all high intensity is the director just gets a higher ticket cap and more to work with. At least as far as my rudimentary understanding of the inner working of the game goes. This is something I'm not 100% on, but this is also how it worked in Vermintide. And the way hordes spawn without modifiers is if you walk past a nav mesh and a specified spot in the nav mesh, and the director has enough tickets, he'll spawn a boss, a horde, etc., etc. All high intensity does is remove the horde triggers, and it just lets him spawn it when he has enough tickets. All Auric does is give him more tickets to work with, same with high intensity. So he's confusing the game's mechanics with something else.
Threaten your team in an attrition style fight, and Smite helps here by granting your team the necessary time to regroup, restock, and breathe.
So I don't know if he doesn't know what the word attrition is or if he just misspoke here, but attrition would be the horde running you out of supplies because it takes you too long to deal with them. Buying yourself time to breathe means it took you longer to deal with the horde, which meant you spent more time and supplies on it, health, ammo, nades, etc. Which means they actually attrition you down harder with Smite. I'm going to assume, because I think JTC is pretty intelligent, that he just completely misspoke here. Because I really don't want to live in the reality where someone that I respect is really stupid and doesn't know what the word attrition means.
Now, while these are all great situations to use Smite in, it's also important to ask how often these above situations actually occur. For one, infinite hordes are map and modifier dependent and may not be relevant depending on the mission you choose to.
Every map has at least one infinite horde spot. There might be like one that I'm forgetting, but it's not map dependent. You know it's going to happen at least once, usually twice. Yeah, every single end event is infinite horde. So yeah, every map has it. And the modifiers just increase the number of hordes and allow them to be spawned on demand. They do not, they don't really do anything else. There is no endless horde modifier. If there was an endless horde modifier, do you not think the 1 million kills frame would not be very coveted? People would just play AoE Psyker builds and just farm out, 10,000 kills in a match in like an hour.
Play. By contrast, running into dangerous mixed hordes or running into a deadly amount of crushers and ragers is incredibly common.
Yeah, maybe those people just deserve to die and rage quit and go back to a lower difficulty. If you are a zealot pressing charge into 5 crushers, instantly eating an overhead and dying, maybe you should not be playing in Maelstrom or arguably even Auric Quickplay. Call me a toxic elitist as much as you want. I would again argue that you're the toxic one for wasting all of our time by knowing literally nothing about the game.
Or is it? See, while dangerous mixed hordes is the most common threat to see from the aforementioned threats, the specific amount of them are also dependent on the mission you choose. Not specifically which map you choose to play, but which difficulty you choose to play.
I really don't like how he just said that, the mission you choose to play, because mission and difficulty is very different things. There are some missions, like, for example, okay, here's a good example. There are some missions where 3-Veg is the hardest mission type. And there, waves of specials, monster specials, Nurgle blessings. But then there's some missions like the Manufactorum where there's all sorts of spots you can fall if you're just gliding along the wall, where waves of specials and monster specials with lights out is actually harder. Because think about lights out. It allows you to have multiple demon hosts that spawn all over the place, and in predetermined positions, there is no random demon host spawning. So Manufactorum has some pretty nasty demon hosts that are really easy to accidentally aggro, like think about the first long bridge section after the Medicaid, after the big staircase in the train area where it's a big, long, sightline. That demon host can be activated through the wall when you're going around it through explosives. So that shuts off your explosives, and it shuts off your ability to shoot behind you. That's a nasty demon host spot, and you're going to get it a lot with lights out. So in that mission, between all the places to fall, all the nasty demon host spots, that's harder than 3-Veg. So mission type does affect what you want to bring, but mission type is not necessarily difficulty.
Not only does the number of enemies increase, but also the frequency at which they spawn. This continues to
that is
increase
true.
Until you reach the maximum difficulty of high-intensity Shock Troop Gauntlet Damnation Auric missions.
Actually, Auric Maelstrom has more spawns because of waves of specialists, because waves of specialists are effectively the same thing as Shock Troop Gauntlet, just instead of elites, it's specials. Then you combine that with specials turning into bosses, which eat away more of your time, which allow the director to get more tickets to spawn more enemies on you. Yeah, it starts snowballing really hard, and if you don't have the damage output to deal with it, you're gonna fold really fast.
In which the entire mission is a non-stop, never-ending wall of elites, specials, and hordes.
He only thinks that because he's used to not just deleting everything with 4 players using meta builds.
This means that as the difficulty rises, Smite becomes better, as these overwhelming situations will be...
This is the survivalist argument, by the way, just not in reverse, a little thing.
Often, whereas as the difficulty lowers, Smite becomes less and less useful, as the...
This is such a reductive way to think about Smite. The better way to think would be, I need to bring more damage that can deal with more threats so that we can push through. Not, I hold things still for my team to hopefully have brought enough to deal with it.
These same situations become rarer. We can also see a similar situation occur with Assail, but in the reverse. It's better at lower difficulties due to the reduced amount of armored units that spawn, which allows it to do its job unimpeded. And it gets worse the higher in difficulty as more and more armored units spawn.
Okay, so now I'm just, flabbergasted. Why would you say this? This is, oh my god. Yes, more things do spawn in higher difficulties. And you know what else? The more common enemies also spawn more. Because they're more common. So they throw more of them at you. Yes, they throw more armored enemies, but by virtue of that, they also throw more unarmored enemies as well. There's just more things because, as he said himself, there's just more things. This is such a bad point. I don't know why he would say this. I've had bad takes before, but that one was just kind of embarrassing. We're just going to give him the benefit of the doubt and just ignore that he just said that.
To be clear, I'm not saying that Smite is useless in lower difficulties or Assail is worthless in higher difficulties, but that a different soft meta forms in different difficulties between these two abilities.
None of the Psyker blitzes are useless. They're all tools. They all have good uses, but none of them are things that you should just use the entire game.
Is this a bad thing? No, absolutely not. In fact, it's actually good, as the difference in power encourages people to try out different talents and builds.
No. Optimize the fun, oh my god, out of games. Here's an actual professional game designer who would definitely know a lot more about this topic. Between all the way from WoW to the grandfather of MTG, this quote has reigned supreme. Players will always optimize the fun out of the game. I hate to break it to you. Everything being equal does not lead to more build diversity. It leads to apathy, where everyone says, fuck it, man. Everything's basically the same. I don't even want to play this game. Or it also leads to a situation where the one time something is noticeably better, everyone flocks to it because it's actually interesting because it's not the same. This is just doing a disservice to Darktide, saying that these things are basically the same and that, they're just as good. It's not only not true, it also makes the game sound far more boring than it actually is. But no, Brain Burst allows you to do things Smite physically can't do. Let's say there's 3 gunners on a demon host. Okay, here's a good example. Do you know the big elevator map where there's a huge bridge and you have to fight at the end of the elevator? You can get a demon host to spawn on top of the Medicaid, which means you can't shoot down that bridge without risking activating the demon host. Well, guess what? Brain Burst. So let's say there's 3 elite gunners standing on that. They will shoot you for the entire event. They will block off you shooting down that bridge at any capacity. You have to fight in the corner for the entire time. Brain Burst allows you to deal with them so you can at least shoot at the horde enemies when they're all stacked up. Brain Burst allows you to do things that nothing else in the game physically allows you to do because of its unique precision deletion mechanics. Well, not mechanic, but just the way that it is.
Which encourages build variety and makes the game overall more interesting. Despite the fact that one blitz may be slightly stronger than the other in a certain difficulty is not unhealthy for the game. Specifically,
he has not made the argument as to why Smite is actually stronger. He's just asserting that it is and assuming that people already agree with this notion, which, like, people at the higher level very clearly don't, as I showed before. Or else you'd actually see people use it. A lot of high-level streamers do not even bother with Smite.
Because these 2 blitzes don't outclass or outshadow each other. They do entirely different things and fit into their own niche, making room for one another.
I do agree with that, but, like, is the niche spamming it when there's only 4 things on screen and a boss? Because this seems like incredibly awful, like, low-skill gameplay right in front of me.
Really take either one with no downsides. Now, you could probably make a convincing argument that Smite chains to a few too many targets a little too fast and should get a slap on the wrist. While I wouldn't necessarily disagree, I would instead suggest to look away from Smite and toward...
I like how he doesn't smite. I just have to say this. I like how he doesn't smite the Poxburster here. Okay, now I know this might actually just be a skill issue. Smite blows up Poxbursters. And Smite pushes Poxbursters back as if you had pushed them twice, then blows them up. So what he's doing right now could lead to a misunderstanding where someone runs up to push the Poxburster and he pops them on them and they're both thinking different things. He could be smiting these guys to deal with them safely, and it would prevent that situation from even being a possibility. So there might just be I'm not too familiar with how this class works going on right now, but I'm not going to say that. I don't want to say anything that could be misconstrued as insulting.
Brain Burst, which has been left in the dust as of late. Rather than nerfing something that is admittedly very strong but not detrimentally so, I would instead suggest for buffing something that is a bit too weak to bring it closer to the other 2 options.
He's absolutely right, man. Brain Burst fucking sucks. It's terrible. Nah, man. Go ahead. Buff the hell out of Brain Burst. Make it do AoE, actually. Let me spend an Empowered Psionics charge so that it hits 20 targets. Sure, I'll take a buff to the thing that I use all the time. You know what? He's right. He's right, guys. Brain Burst, terrible, awful. Nobody uses it. Why would anyone use it? I mean, come on. Why would anyone use it? It's terrible.
Which would make it a more viable choice in play, and therefore diversify builds even more. When it comes to high-intensity ore commissions, Smite will always be meta due to the sheer amount of enemies.
This is very not true.
Lower difficulties could stand to benefit from having Brain Burst be an even more viable option, though, which would help reduce the amount of times you see Smite and Assail, and help shake up build variety.
Wait. Are people doing that? Are people playing on Heresy and using Smite? Please in the comments tell me if that's a thing people are doing. That sounds horrible.
Just a little bit more. Thanks for watching, and thanks to this month's Patreons for their continued support. Make sure to like and subscribe.
So, Smite is problematic because it builds bad habits. If you need Smite to think about it like this. If you need Smite to melee a horde, you are not good enough to play the game at higher difficulties. If you don't need Smite to melee down the horde, Smite's not contributing anything. There's no 2 ways about it. It's either so good or it's not doing anything. But I would like to propose an alternative solution. Instead of changing any of these, because a lot of the reason people pick Brain Rupture is for kinetic flare. Yes, that's a real reason why people pick this, but this is another thing. This is a pretty low level take because he's ignoring the tree. Have you ever considered that people might be picking Smite so they can benefit from Psykinetics Aura and something like Mind in Motion on a build that also uses like the Surge Staff? Because something like that is not unheard of. This is Dre's build, by the way. And here's the thing, right? If you go Assail, you're locked out of Psykinetics Aura, which is just arguably one of the best nodes in the entire game. And there's 2 support nodes that also modify it. You can change the power level of these things without making any mechanical gameplay changes to them. For example, what if one with the warp was replacing this? So instead of every fucking goddamn meta Psyker build ever being built like this, instead of that, now you have to choose. Do I want this so I have more armor ability? Do I want the Smite, even though I'm not going to really use Smite all that much, so I can get one with the Warp? There are things you can do. If you're dead set on not changing the gameplay, you can change this stuff. I think that covers just about everything that I want to talk about.